we set up this Arduino and the motor, and we're going to try and make it run now. And this is the motor driver, and we named him L2. So the first time we got the motor moving was when we tried to do it with Arduino, and then we tried to do it with the breadboard, but we ended up just trying to test it by hooking it directly to power, and it's working.
Are you going?
Yeah.
So it's working. It just needed a little boost. The motor is too weak to actually start on its own. But once we give it a little boost, a little start, then it goes. Breadboard configuration is
Yeah,
working.
the breadboard setup worked. It's using power from both the Arduino and from these batteries. And yeah, we realized because when we were testing it without using just direct power from the Arduino, after we stopped applying the power, it still kept going, and that's because yeah, it was if you stop it, see, it's too like weak to start on its own, but if you give it a little push, then it keeps going.
All right, so we're gonna, instead of using the breadboard, we're gonna switch it over to the Arduino. So now we're gonna hook these guys that I just pulled out from the breadboard back into the Arduino on these guys, these numbers.
Yeah, we found out that we were trying to use just 2 batteries before, but it was not enough power to even get the motor turning, even if you give it a push. So like the minimum, I guess, was 4 batteries or 6 volts. But we're gonna use 9. We're gonna use all 3 battery packs and connect them right to the L2, and then we're gonna use the 5 volts from the Arduino to go into to power the circuitry on the L2.
So now we have it working with the Arduino program. And the motor started all on its own. We didn't have to give it the push start. But so our error was that we had our correct code here, but we had to put it in our loop and call the actual function of demo 1. So now it's working perfectly.
Yeah, we didn't have the function in the loop before, so all we had was a declared function. So there was that, and then there was also the fact that the battery was too short or too low. But yeah, now this seems to be working at least. So now we hooked up a second motor to the L2, and we wrote a new program here to see if we can make it turn on. So these should both be able to turn on now. So once we tried to upload code to get both of the motors running, they just both stopped working, and then now when we're testing it with the breadboard, it's doing weird stuff and seems to not be working. Like when we connect am I doing this right? Yeah, you want to hold it. When we connect this to power, this one starts spinning, but and it makes the other one start spinning a little bit, just when you first connect it, but it doesn't keep going. Wait, did it keep going that time?
I'll try again.
Oh,
It feels like it did more.
Yeah, it looked like it did a little bit more than it usually did.
Yeah. It's trying.
No. Arduino cat.
Arduino cat.
So I got the fan connected to the L2 again, and to the breadboard using the Arduino as power. But it still won't turn on. Like it's just not, it should be turning on right now, but it's not. And if I take the other fan and it just connected directly to the power from the Arduino and then close the loop, then both of them start turning for a little bit, and then the yellow one slows down first, and then the red one slows down a little bit more, and then it keeps going, which is weird. And then if I take it off again, and the lights come back on. When I plug it in, the lights dim, the voltage drops, and for some reason the voltage drop is making the yellow fan, which is connected to the L2, it's making it turn on, which doesn't make sense to me. Okay, well, since plugging in the red fan made the voltage drop to the L2, I figured we'd try to plug it into the 3.3 volts instead, and then the setup started working. So even though I thought this input was supposed to be 5 volts, for some reason it's working on 3.3 but not on 5. So the fan's working now, and it worked. We connected it to the Arduino and made the logic go through these 1 kilo ohm resistors, because for some reason it was the logic for this board seemed to need 3 volts instead of 5. So I tried to put some resistors under that make it voltage less, and it made the code start working. But you can only spin one fan at a time because it seems like, I don't know, the power supply is not big enough. Here I connected 18 volts, and now I took the Arduino out of it, so the Arduino is just being used for the power supply for the logic for the board. And it's still, you can't power both the fans at once. Like, you can power the yellow one, but if you try to do both of them at the same time, they'll both turn off, and like you can't get either of them to start. But if you take the yellow one, disconnect the yellow one, then the red one will start. So it's as if, 18 volts, these are supposed to be 1.5 volt motors, or 3 volt motors, something in that range. So feels like this should definitely be enough power to supply both of them. I don't know why it's not like, it's just like, it seems like something is dropping the voltage so significantly on the motors, or through the boards or through the wiring, that it's making it so you can't run them both at the same time. This, maybe I'll try connecting just the motors in series to this battery power supply, and then I'll probably see that it's this board that is dropping the voltage too much, because the only thing that this is going through is that board. Yeah, I don't know if it needs this. This is the Arduino power. Now that the voltage is so high, I didn't think that it needed that, but shit, I don't know. So this battery is open, and these two are connected, and it makes both the fans spin. So even just 3 volts, 6 volts for each fan, or 6 volts for both fans, makes both of them spin when they're connected in series. So I tried to connect the batteries to ground themselves instead of to the Arduino's ground. So all the ground is going to this 9 volt is powering the fan, and this ground is going to the negative of the batteries. I don't know if this is right, but I tried this and it didn't work either. I feel like I'm just gonna give up right now, at least for now. So I used this LED light to test. So these, the outputs of the Arduino, they're apparently 5 volts each, and then we got the pulse width modulation outputs that are You can vary, you know, from 0 to 255, that number 3 and number 9 that we're using as PWM. So all the outputs are working. I think maybe we fried both of the boards, both of the L2s, maybe by giving it too much power when we were connecting. I mean, I was connecting like all these batteries together and putting it into, I mean, I don't remember what I did. I probably did lots of different stuff, but there was, I think for the most part, at least, we were putting the batteries into the input and to the ground, but I don't know. It seems like this jumper is supposed to, I don't know if it's left in place or not left in place. I have to check. So this guy here at the bottom, it says, when the jumper is enabled, you will not supply 5 volts to the 5 volt input terminal. When the jumper is removed, you will need to supply 5 volts to the 5 volt input terminal. So, I mean, we've had the jumper in place like the whole time we've been doing this, and we've been supplying 5 volts to the input there. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that could have been what burned out the motors then. This guy says if your power supply is up to 12 volts, you can leave in the jumper, and the 5 volts will be an output. So I guess in that case, you would also not be connecting 5 volts input to there. I don't know if it would. I don't know if that means it would damage the board though, the Arduino. If there's voltage coming out of there, we had it connected to the 5 volt pin. Would it damage the Arduino board, or would it damage the L2? I'm not sure. So this guy says if you leave the jumper in place, 5 volts will be output from the module from pin 6 from that plus 5 volts pin. And this one also says when the jumper is in place, you do not supply 5 volts to the input, which, you know, is another way, I guess, of saying that it's going to be an output, or at least that you don't put it in. And this third source is saying when the jumper is in place, the 5 volt regulator is enabled, supplying, and the 5 volt acts as an output. So I thought that these sites were saying different stuff. I just wasn't reading them correctly. I guess because of this guy didn't specifically say that it would be an output pin. He just said not to use it as an input when there was. But yeah, I got confused about that at some point. And so I mean, we've been supplying input voltage to these motors, or to these motor drivers, with the jumper in place. So I mean, maybe that's what one of the things that was damaged it. Some other guy also said that maybe because these are like supposed to be 3 volt motors, and we've been powering them with 3 volts wouldn't even get them started, I don't think. At least not, it didn't seem like they would through the driver, at least not the way we were hooking them up. So somebody said that if you're supplying too much power to a motor like that, it might damage the motor driver. So maybe that was another thing. I guess we should be able to test this motor driver somehow with a voltmeter, test these motor drivers and see if they're still good or what. Because according to, you know, the instructions, these, you know, you should be feeding, this is the main power input to this one, and then that should be dropping the voltage only by like 1.4. So, but it seems like there's no voltage coming out of these at all, or very, very little. So I mean, something might have been damaged on this thing. Maybe that's why it's doing that. I mean, maybe we connected it wrong from the start and just like burnt something out. Because I think the fan should run even on 1 point. Actually, I don't know if we haven't tested the fan on 1.5 volts. Maybe I'll try and see that. So as we can see here, we're just using 1.5 volts and the fan is running, you know, just as fast as it ever was. I don't even think it's going faster than it is at 3 volts. Yeah, let me test if it goes faster with 3 volts. Yeah, so here when we give the fan 3 volts, it doesn't seem to go much faster. Seems like there's not really any change. So I guess the voltage doesn't affect the speed of the fan. I'm going to make that the end of this first video segment, and I'll put another one up for the rest of the project.